I want to show you something now that I think is important as well. Take a look at this video. Look at this. See that? That's a Russian Tu-160 bomber, the biggest supersonic Mach 2 aircraft ever built. And there it is, landing in Venezuela. Now, you think that's going to cause a stink? The answer is yes. In fact, it already has caused a stink. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will describe his feelings about this, and they're not nice. We're going to have a lot more on this part of the story in just a little bit. But first, let me do what we like to do on this newscast often, and that is to try to explain something that most of us as Americans simply don't know, but maybe we should know, right? The mission of this newscast, I've told you this from the very beginning, my first day sitting on this chair. I've said it many times. We don't just do the story and then drive on by. What we try to do is ask the question, how'd we get here? How'd we get to this point with this particular story? So let's do that, because to answer that question, I need to take you back now to 1990 and tell you about something that happened back then at and it's something our media does not pay attention to or remind you of, but it's important. Okay, so what happened in 1990, Rick Sanchez? Here's the answer. The U.S., while negotiating the reunification of Germany, remember the whole Mr. Gorbachev take down this wall thing? Well, the U.S. swore and made a promise to the Russians that if they helped reunify Germany, they would have nothing to worry about in terms of the United States or NATO expansion. In fact, here's the language that was actually used in the transcript of the meetings held in Moscow, February 9th of 1990. James Baker, remember him? Working for George Bush, President George Bush. He tells Mikhail Gorbachev that in exchange for cooperation from Mr. Gorbachev and from Russia on the Germany thing, the U.S. will make and this is a quote, an ironclad guarantee. Remember those words, ironclad guarantee that NATO will not expand, quote, 1 inch eastward, not 1 inch. The quid pro quo was clear. You, Russia, will agree to a deal in Germany, and we, the United States and NATO, will agree to not encroach near your country. Mr. Gorbachev agrees, deal done, promise, handshake, boom, done, fine, right? No, not so fast. Because let me show you a couple of things. I've got a couple of maps here that I want to show you, and I'm going to show you how this whole thing broke down afterward. Okay, so here's 1990. Here's the NATO countries that you see here in the dark blue, or the navy blue, as we like to say, right? At the time, James Baker made this promise, and he said, this is it. We're not going to go this way. We promise. We will not do that. What happened? Watch. Change the map for me. That's what happened. Okay, after the promise was made, these are the countries that are now part of NATO, right? Look, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and this is interesting. In other words, the promise to expand was not kept. All right, let me show you what is bound to have the Russians feeling jittery, if not downright threatened, because it's not just these countries. There's two in particular that are very important. It's right here. See that? Estonia and Latvia. What is that? Russia, Estonia, and Latvia. Right up against the border, right? Could you imagine how we as Americans would respond if Russia or China or Iran or, I don't know, name your bad country, right? If they were part of a military organization that had troops amassed on the border with Mexico, how would we react? How would we as Americans? How would you react? How would I react, right? We'd be like freaked out by that, right? By the way, President Putin, going by the old adage that if you can't beat him, then join him, what the hell, right? Has said on several occasions that he's willing to join NATO, be part of the peacekeeping force. Hey, include us in there, right? He met with President Clinton and asked to be a part of it and discussed it with him and others. So far, no dice. So here's the question. Who is willing, who is NATO courting as possibly a potential new member instead? You're looking at it right there. See that video? All right, that is NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg meeting with Ukraine President Petro Poroshenko. This is in 2016. What are they doing? They're complaining about Russia. Come back to me real quick, because I want to show you why that's important. So here you've got NATO now not only doing Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Moldova, and all that stuff. No. Now they're also courting Ukraine. Look at that border with Russia, right? So you do have to ask yourself whether Russia should start to feel a little surrounded, right? Look, this is not about taking sides, right? This is about just presenting both sides of the story and asking the eternal question, how'd we get here? I'm Rick Sanchez. This is RT America, where we do believe it is time to do news again. Let's begin here. And this is the story. Russia lands a plane in Venezuela. You saw a little bit of the video. You're about to see a lot more with a very enthusiastic RT reporter covering it as it happened. Is it a show of force to the West? The West, in the form of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, is lashing out against Russia. One of the nastiest and most vitriolic anti-Russian statement made since the evil empire, quote. Pompeo calls Russia a corrupt country that squanders public funds, squelches liberty and freedom while its people suffer.
Russia's government has sent bombers halfway around the world to Venezuela. The Russian and Venezuelan people should see this for what it is. Two corrupt governments squandering public funds and squelching liberty and freedom while their people suffer.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin's spokesperson responded by calling Pompeo's language both undiplomatic and inappropriate. Dmitry Peskov then took his own swipe, suggesting comments about squandering public funds seems odd coming from a country, he says, quote, where half of whose military budget would be enough to feed the whole of Africa.
This is a very undiplomatic step from the U.S. Secretary of State. It's a serious accusation, pointed at the Russian government, and we believe it is not an appropriate statement. Talking about public spending, we do not agree with this. More on that, this is an inappropriate statement from a country which could feed the whole of Africa with half its military budget. We continue to seek dialogue with our colleagues and hope for Washington's readiness sooner rather than later.
So I know we're going fast here and trying to cover a lot of ground, but it's important. And it's important to show that that is what two Russian bombers arriving in Venezuela has set off. Here now, the story is told by RT reporter Maria Finoshima.
Here it is, one of the two Russian Tupolev Tu-160 strategic nuclear-capable bombers has just landed here in Venezuela. Wow, spectacular! Spectacular! And fighter jets accompanying right there in the skies after an almost 13-hour flight, non-stop, long range over Atlantic from the base in Russia's north. Wow, the two aircrafts have covered a distance of more than 10,000 kilometers, and they flew over Atlantic before they landed here in Venezuela. Tu-160 is supersonic strategic bomber, Black Jack under NATO classification, known in Russia as White Swan. It is designed to deliver nuclear and conventional weapons and strike strategic targets. It may carry up to 12 missiles at once.
Such flights are useful to us. Within Russia, we can conduct long-distance non-stop flights, but not one like this. The aircraft crossed an ocean and passed through different latitudes, which is useful for training and demonstrating aircraft reliability.
This visit is part of a very close military cooperation between the two countries. Russia is Venezuela's army #1 provider, with its helicopters, fighter jets, rocket complexes and other weaponry being in active use by the country's armed forces for years already under multi-billion contracts. The country's defense minister has come to the airfield to personally greet the Russian pilots.
Our armed forces have improved their combat readiness. We are constantly working to raise our game and ensure that we have a modern military capable of defending the country.
Russia and Venezuela have already conducted numerous joint military drills, and later this week on Wednesday, these two White Swans are expected to leap to the air as part of yet another Russian-Venezuelan military training.
Jim Jatras is joining us, former U.S. diplomat, good enough to talk to us about this. Why do you think the Russians this was just a macho show of force. Look at us. We're big and bad, too, and we're tired of you guys showing how big and bad you are. And we're going to show how big and bad we are by landing these 2 planes in Venezuela, your hemisphere.
I think there's an element of that. I think, as you showed very much on the map, when we, let's be honest, broke a promise not to expand 1 inch further east, and are right up in their face. Right, yeah. And remember, we still have declarations on the table from 2008 that not only Ukraine, but Georgia will be members of NATO. We see the rising tensions in Ukraine now. The maneuvers we're having still on Russia's borders, right on their territorial waters. They're basically saying, look, if you want a new Cold War, if you want to go back to that, we've got capabilities too. You're used to being the master of everything in your hemisphere. Yeah. They're not right on our border, but they're on our hemisphere, and they're showing they can do it.
As an American, can you tell me why my country is so dead set on always seemingly wanting to have Russia as its arch enemy? Like forever and ever, no matter what they do or what happens?
You know, there's no rational reason from the point of view of national interests of the United States or the welfare and safety and prosperity of the American people.
So why then? So why?
I think there's several elements to it. I think, first off, there are an awful lot of rice bowls that get filled with the whole industrial complex. And it's not just military-industrial complex. I think the whole deep state is powered on I think that's part of it. And, you know, look, all those McMansions in the Washington suburbs have to be paid for somehow, right? Yeah. But I think there's more to it than that. I think there are people who really do feel we have some kind of historic mission to bring peace, democracy, human rights, free markets to the rest of the world. And if they don't like it, well, then, you know, we have to get rough sometimes.
So the whole Paul Wolfowitz was the first one that started that doctrine, you know, the doctrine that the United States has the right to rule the world after all. By golly, and we will, right?
I think the real key, there's a 1996 article by Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan toward a neo-Reaganite foreign policy, and they called for a benevolent global hegemony that would last forever. And if the Russians and Chinese don't like it, we should take it as a compliment.
So, Jim, is there any hope here? Do you see... It doesn't look to me, I know Americans want to hate Putin, and, you know, now the left is even anti-Putin and anti-Russia, so everybody seems to be, but it doesn't seem to me that they're acting in such bad faith all the time as the media portrays them.
No, I don't think that's the case. I realize, especially on this network, people are going to say, "Oh, it's special pleading." All
no, I got no dogs in this fight.
Not you, but people will say that. And look, I'm a Trump man. You're not.
Right.
He ran in 2016 saying we're going to get along with the Russians. We're going to get along with the Chinese. And then you look around him, he's got all the people from the same neocon swamp that brought us 30 years of these policies.
Is that why that happened today? Is that why you got Pompeo calling Russia the worst country in the world?
Absolutely. Why does he have a no-good, terrible national security team that would have been much better in a Mitt Romney administration? I don't have the answer to that question.
Jim, you're always a great guest. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Fun conversation.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.